World of Warcraft Firelands Raid, Alysrazor 10-Man Heroic Guide. Alysrazor is the fourth boss of the Firelands Raid. It is a long and heavily scripted fight. This fight consists of 4 phases, repeating until the death of Alysrazor. In Phase 1, you will have to deal with 4 different set of ads. Blazing Talon initiates, who has 2 sets of abilities. The first ability is Brush Fire. Brush Fire summons a small wave of fire dealing 60,000 fire damage to any player hit. This ability cannot be interrupted. However, the Blazing Talon initiates can be stunned to prevent them from completing this cast. The second ability is Fireblast. Blazing Talon initiates will also cast Fireblast at their target, dealing 40,000 fire damage, plus another 20,000 fire damage every 3 seconds for the next 12 seconds. Fireblast can and must be interrupted to prevent the damage and to prevent the Blazing Talon initiates from gaining a stack of the Fired Up buff with each successful cast, increasing their damage done and spell casting speed by 10% per stack. The second set of ads are the Voracious Hatchlings. These ads are the tank's priority. These ads have the following abilities: Imprinted, Satiated, Hungry, and Tantrum, Gushing Wound. Every 6 seconds, the Voracious Hatchlings will also cast Gushing Wound in a 60-degree cone in front of them. If the attack lands, the tank will bleed for 25k health per second for a full minute. The only way to drop this debuff is to let the tank's health fall below 50% HP, so healers must let the tanks drop below that threshold on purpose to reduce their incoming damage. While they're alive, the plump lava worms rotate 360 degrees, continuously channeling lava spew, dealing 60,000 fire damage to enemies caught in the 18-yard-long flamethrower. So tanks and all the raid members must be careful navigating around the flamethrower's path when approaching the Voracious Hatchlings. Only 4 plump lava worms spawn with each set of 2 Voracious Hatchlings, or just enough to clear Tantrum twice on each hatchling. So the tanks must hurry to kill their bird and may ask for the assistance of ranged DPS and dot classes to speed things up. The Voracious Hatchlings cleave in front of them and will have to be dragged in the arena toward the next plump lava worm, so the raid must be very careful not to step too close to them, especially during Tantrum. Molten Feather, Flying Phase. Flying, DPS priority. After gaining the Wings of Flame buff, DPS can chase Alysrazor, which is roaming in the sky, and start chipping away at her health bar to speed up the fight. In the sky, Alysrazor periodically spawns rings of fire in her wake open for 3 seconds. Flying players must run through to refresh the duration of their Wings of Flame buff and continue flying, but more importantly, to gain 1 stack of blazing power for each ring of fire crossed. Blazing Power increases your haste by 8% per stack for 40 seconds, stacking up to 25 stacks, and restores 5% of your class resource. Upon reaching 25 stacks of Blazing Power, players gain the additional Alysrazor buff, which increases critical strike chances by 75% for the next 40 seconds, which is also refreshed alongside Blazing Power by subsequent Rings of Fire, tremendously increasing your damage done to the boss on top of all that haste for the ultimate DPS padding. Alysrazor also creates incendiary clouds behind her in the sky, which deals 60,000 fire damage every second to players within 5 yards and disappear after 3 seconds. Flying DPS must carefully fly through the Rings of Fire as often as possible and quickly return to the boss's flanks to avoid incendiary clouds. Dealing with the Blazing Talon initiates and Voracious Hatchlings on the ground remains the absolute priority of Phase 1 if you wish to continue on to Phase 2. Molten Meteor and Firestorm, ranged DPS priority. A Herald of the Burning End will spawn through a portal at the very center of the arena every 30 seconds and begin casting Cataclysm. The Herald of the Burning End has a ritual of the Flame Aura, making himself immune to damage and dealing 50,000 fire damage each second to all players standing within 4 yards of them, so everyone must stay away while the Herald of the Burning End is doing his shenanigans. After a 5-second cast, Cataclysm will summon a giant molten meteor from the sky on top of the Herald. The meteoric impact will deal 1 million damage to any player standing within 5 yards of the Herald of the Burning End, so stay away from the center. After it crashes onto the ground, the molten meteor will start rolling in a random direction, dealing 406 to k fire damage to any player it rolls over. The meteor will split into 3 smaller molten boulders if it hits a wall, and each will start rolling in the opposite direction again, also squishing players on their path. To stop the molten meteor from wreaking havoc in your raid, all ranged DPS must immediately swap to it and nuke it for 160k HP to stop it in its track and freeze it in place. The Herald of the Burning End will summon to molten meteors between each firestorm. Phase 1 will summon to molten meteors between each firestorm. Twice per Phase 1, Alysrazor will land in the center and cast a firestorm, dealing 45,000 fire damage per second to all players for the next 5 seconds. The only way to survive this firestorm is for all the raid to hide behind one of the 2 dead molten meteors. Fiery Vortex. Alysrazor begins creating strong winds and stripping the wings of flame buff. The harsh wind spawns a big fiery vortex at the center, dealing 30,000 fire damage to all players. Players will receive 10,000 fire damage per second until they step back between the fiery vortex and the harsh wind zone. The fiery vortex creates 5 fiery tornadoes that will circle for the next 20 seconds and dealing 70,000 fire damage to each player in their path. Dodge the incoming fiery tornadoes until the next phase. Alysrazor runs out of gas and crashes in the center. The boss receives the burnout buff, increasing damage taken by 50% until her other buff Spark restores her molten power bar to 50% after 30 seconds. The raid should stack behind the boss for raid healing. Pop Lust or Hero as soon as she hits the ground, on top of all DPS cooldowns to bring Alysrazor as low as possible during these 30 seconds. 5 seconds after Alysrazor crashes into the arena, 2 Blazing Talon Clawshaper ads will fly down from the sky on the outer edge of the arena to assist her in her healing. They will begin channeling ignition on the boss every few seconds, restoring 1 molten power per second. These ads should be interrupted immediately. Once Alysrazor's molten power bar reaches 50%, she awakens and becomes active again. She will begin to cast Blazing Clawing on the tank, dealing 125,000 physical damage every 1.5 seconds. The tank must taunt and position Alysrazor away from the raid once the molten power bar reaches 50%, while everyone stacks behind, not to get hit by her cleaving attack. Blazing Claw increases physical and fire damage taken by the tank by 10% for 15 seconds, stacking with each successful attack, requiring major defensive cooldowns or a tank swap until the Blazing Claw stacks drops. Her Spark buff turns into Ignited, restoring 2 molten power every second, which means she will reach 100 molten power and end phase 4. Ignited pulsates a wave of blazing buffet every second, dealing 17,000 fire damage to the raid, so everyone must stay grouped behind the boss to help healers with raid healing. After 25 seconds, Alysrazor reaches full power and explodes, dealing 70,000 fire damage to the raid and knocking everyone back. She then takes flight again to loop back to Phase 1.